Next type of asexual reproduction is spore formation. Spores are thin-walled, single-celled propagules, and they are basically found in organisms belonging to Monera, Protista, algae, and fungi. Spore formation is of many types. There are many different types of spores that are formed. We'll be discussing a few of them just to understand how they facilitate asexual reproduction in these organisms. So, one type of spores are the zoospores. The zoospores are the motile spores which are formed in aquatic individuals. The organisms that live in water, they form the zoospores. One example is the Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas forms zoospores in specialized structures called as the zoosporangium. These zoospores, they are single-celled and they are motile. They swim with the help of their flagella and they move in the water and they give rise to a new individual. The next kind of spores are the conidia. Conidia are the spores which are non-motile in nature. They are again thin-walled. So let us write the example here, Chlamydomonas. The second type are the conidia. They are formed in the penicillium fungi. You all must be aware of the penicillium fungi, that this was the first antibiotics. It was discovered from this fungi by Alexander Fleming. Must have read about it in your previous chapters or previous classes. So conidia, now how they help in dispersal? The conidia, they are formed on specialized hyphae which are known as the conidiophores. So these conidiophores, they give rise to the conidia. In certain species, these conidia are formed in chains, and in some other, it can be formed terminal also and single also. Fine. So these are the specialized hyphae called as conidiophores. So what happens that these conidia, the new ones keep forming from here and the older ones, they are eliminated or they kind of drop off from the tip and they give rise to a new organism. The third type of spores that are formed are the chlamydospores. The chlamydospores can be seen in organisms such as Rhizopus, and these chlamydospores are usually formed in the unfavorable conditions. They are formed directly on the hyphae and they are thick-walled. Now these spores also, the chlamydospores also, they can be intercalary or they can be terminal in some cases. So the next type is the chlamydospores. Another type of spores that are formed in certain fungi are the oidea. These spores are thin-walled and again non-motile, and they are nothing but they are the fragments of the specialized hyphae. These fragments, when they fall on a substratum, they give rise to the new individual. And these oidea, they are formed in conditions when there is an excess of water, salt or sugar. And example is again Rhizopus also makes oidea and also agaricus or mushrooms. Another type of spores are the sporangiospores. Sporangiospores can be seen in Rhizopus on specialized hyphae called as the sporangiophores. So if you can see here, so this kind of hyphal structures, and they have a structure called as sporangium on them, And inside the sporangium, these spores are formed. The sporangiospores are formed. When this sporangium, it ruptures, it releases these sporangiospores into the environment. So these kind of spores can also be seen in Rhizopus. So this was the another type of asexual mode of reproduction by spore formation. Next, we come to asexual reproduction in plants. Now, asexual reproduction in plants is called as vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is a process of multiplication in which a part or portion of the plant body, it acts as a propagule and helps in vegetatively increasing or multiplying the number of plants. Vegetative propagation can be natural as well as artificial, since it is beneficial to the farmers as well as the agriculturalists. How is it beneficial? One, it accelerates the rate of multiplication. The multiplication of plants is faster when we are following the vegetative mode of reproduction as compared to the sexual modes of reproduction. Secondly, the good characters of the parents can be maintained in the new plants. If the variety, there is a plant variety which has a high yield, is disease resistant, then all these qualities can be maintained when we grow plants or propagate plants by the method of vegetative propagation. So let us discuss what are the various methods by which vegetative propagation takes place in plants. As we discussed earlier, right now, that vegetative propagation is a process in which in which a plant part, a fragment or a portion of the plant part, it acts as a propagule. Now this portion can be either the part from root of the plant, it can be either from the stem, or it can be from the leaves. Now, depending upon which part of the plant acts as a propagule, different plants have different modes of vegetative propagation. For the roots, we can take the example of Delbergia or Shisham plant. In this, the roots, they develop certain adventitious buds, and then these adventitious buds, they give rise to a new plant. This kind of vegetative propagation also seen in sweet potato. This is another example. In this, what happens? These are the root tubers. So adventitious buds on these root tubers, they can be either cut from the plant and regrown to give rise to a new plant, or the whole of the sweet potato, it acts as a new plant. Then, certain stems also, they undergo vegetative propagation. These can be divided into three types. One are the aerial stems that undergo vegetative propagation, the subaerial stems, and the underground stems. Let us take these examples one by one. You all must have seen the sugarcane plant. What does it look like? A sugarcane plant looks something like this, and it has got various nodes and internodes. Okay, so it has got the long leaves here and so it is something like this. So any one of its portion which has something like this, and it has got various nodes and internodes. Okay, so it has got the long leaves here and so it is something like this. So any one of its portion which has a node with a bud, when it is cut off from the main plant and sown in the soil, it gives rise to a new plant. Now, examples of the subaerial plants which can undergo vegetative propagation. Again, you all must have seen the grass plant. The grass plant is one such example which propagates vegetatively. How does that happen? These plants are called as runners and they creep on the ground. So, at one point where the grass is growing, suppose this is the soil and this is a grass plant, at this point it develops a stem. This stem grows horizontally over a period, and then at one of its nodes, wherever soil conditions are favorable, it gives rise to another plant. Now, this portion can be 1 internode long, 2 internode longs, or more than that, depending upon the place where these grass plants or the runners are growing. Similar to runners, there are one more example, which are the offsets. Offsets are also plants which grow through vegetative propagation. The very common example of offset is Eichhornia or the water hyacinth. The water hyacinth or the Eichhornia is also called as the terror of Bengal. Now, why is it called so? Let us try to understand. Now, these offsets or the water hyacinth, since they are aquatic plants, they have thick leaves. They look something like this and they grow on the surface of the water, having leaves on the outer surface and the bulbous roots inside the water. So both the leaves and the roots, they have parenchyma in them so that it facilitates the floating of this plant. At this point, these plants, they grow a stem which grows on the surface of water, and at the end of one internode, rather at this next node, it gives rise to the leaves at the top and roots at the bottom. So this is the water. Now, the stem also is bulbous and soft in nature. So eventually at times this stem, it disintegrates or it rots and dissolves or disappears, and these water hyacinth can be seen floating individually on the water surfaces. Now, why are they called terror of Bengal? They are called so because they have the ability to grow at a very fast rate. As a result, so happens that they cover the whole of the water surface and they consume all the oxygen in that particular water body and kill the natural vegetation and the fish that are living in that water body. Hence, they are termed as the terror of Bengal. So now let us discuss how the underground stem, they help in vegetative propagation. You must have all seen the potato. These are the tubers, and a potato has eyes or the nodes on its surface. Each node has the ability to give rise to a new plant. So if we cut a portion of this potato containing the node or the eye and we grow it in the soil, it can give rise to a new plant. Similarly, the underground stem, like the rhizome, example is ginger. They are structures like this, growing horizontally in the soil, and they have circular nodes. And in these nodes, there are certain buds, and each bud has the ability to give rise to a new plant. Similarly, are examples like bulbs or the onion, which is one of the example of a bulb. These bulbs also, they have condensed shoots at their base, and this shoot has the ability to give rise to a new plant. And the corms, such as colocasia, they also are the underground stem. Colocasia is the example. So these are also the underground stem which have the ability to propagate vegetatively.